PCI is a beast when it comes to framework. There are about 12 controls. The biggest things I would say when we are designing single cloud or a multi-cloud architecture in compliance with PCI, I think one of the biggest thing is scoping. The reason I say scoping is important is because every machine that comes in scope has about 200 plus controls that get implied to them. And the best thing you want to do is make sure you reduce the scope. So because it's expensive for the company, it's a fine balance you want to draw as far as security is concerned. You don't want to overdo and kind of bring the entire organization in scope, and you're now having to manage a whole lot of more than what you're supposed to be doing. So scoping is, I would say, the first thing that you would have to do. Make sure you do understand what the cardholder data flow is like, what are the machines that are coming in scope because of the cardholder data. As far as the PCI is concerned, if cardholder data touches, or if it is stored, or if it's transmitted, or if it's processed, that machine comes in scope, and any machines connected to it also come in scope. So it's kind of like contagious, which goes back to my first point on we want to make sure the scoping is right. In fact, PCI does not actually call out segmentation as a requirement. It's more as a best practice. I would say that segmentation is kind of like step one, because once you kind of do that, then all the controls that you kind of put on it is way more better organized, because you know where you're putting that particular control. Once you're done with scoping or segmentation, which is derived from scoping, I would say the next would be IAM. Access management is going to be very critical when it comes to multi-cloud architecture. You want to make sure you have the least privilege model being built out. You want to make sure there's just-in-time access, privileged access, all that stuff. You don't want to have employees who no longer need access to continue having access to the infrastructure. So there needs to be effective process when it comes to folks who are leaving. There's offboarding, onboarding, roles being changed, and all that stuff. So IAM would be the second biggest thing that I would consider. The third would be the network security controls, and that has different subsets. There's intrusion prevention systems, detection systems, AV, making sure your containers are having runtime security if you're running in a containerized environment. So all the stuff under network security, there's a whole plethora of controls that different clouds provides a part of the tool set. There's VPC service controls, there's controls given to you by the firewall itself if you're using a cloud firewall. The good thing with pretty much a good number of clouds are they have done a really good work in kind of building these controls out for us, and the tools out for us. All we need to do is kind of use them. And the challenge comes on where to use it and how much in depth you want to use it. You don't want to overdo it, but I guess that's where the challenge is. So we did talk about segmentation, we talked about IAM, and we talked about network security controls. The fourth one is security controls, especially the network security controls, is more of a preventive stuff in nature. Then comes the detection part. There's no use of building alerts on something if you're not going to be monitoring it. So that's where the detection logic comes in. So you want to make sure that all of this that you're building is being fed into a SIEM, and there's someone looking at it. If there's no one looking at it, it's just sitting there doing nothing. That's where you're gonna have to think through on what is important for me. Where are my crown jewels? Should I be thinking about when it comes to building my monitoring control? How am I looking at my access logs? How am I looking at who's logging in? When are they logging in? How am I building my runbooks? You need to come up with the correlation runbooks. Sharan logging in at 2 o'clock in the morning, not a bad thing, but he logging in from US and China or pretty much any other country at the same time, now we have a problem. So that's the thing about those correlation runbooks. So that's a subset of the logging controls. Is once you kind of have all the logs being fed into a SIEM, you're gonna have to come up with that monitoring logic. You're gonna have to come up with that runbooks. That's where the correlation engine comes into play. The cloud vendors have also done a good part in kind of building them out for us to a certain extent. But then the challenge is when you have a multi-cloud architecture, you obviously cannot be looking at 2 different places or 3 different places at the same time. So that's when you need a centralized system to help you out with it. And of course, to top to that, you would have to have a team or staff who's looking at the logs and taking actionable alerts to those logs pretty much around the clock. It could be your own team if you're big enough, or you could outsource it to a SOC who would then have access to your infrastructure and build it for you and even manage it for you. So logging is another important thing we talked about. I think the last one would be the compliance. Any company, any organization, compliance is a pretty important aspect, especially in fintech. Well, at least if you're dealing with cardholder data, you got to be PCI compliant. So with that comes several other requirements, as in like you need to go through checkboxes, making sure that those are checked. As far as I'm concerned, security is not just about checkbox. Compliance is good, but then merely being compliant does not mean that you're secure. We would have to make sure that we are checking the box for compliance, but we are also doing what we would have to do beyond just the minimum requirements or minimum checkboxes that needs to be put in. Things like patch management, things like building out the preventive and detective controls that we talked about. A good number of those may not be a requirement, like to a depth that we would want to do. But then rather than just checking a box that says that, are you doing patch management? Yes. Rather than that, my thought process would be to kind of build out an effective patch management framework or a patch management program. Or the same goes with the monitoring control program. Building out a holistic program when it comes to information security, I think are the key things required to build out an architecture that's secure.